You're listening to Underworld on the Ghost Radio Network.
Listen.
Hauntings. The unexplained. Synchronicity. EVP.
So what are you?
I heard that.
Absolutely fascinating.
What are Min lights? Is it real? What do you think?
I love you.
The unseen.
I'm alright.
1111.
Who or what are mutilating cattle?
Listen.
Poltergeists. Your stories. Your experiences. Listen close.
The Starchild Skull is the name given to an anomalous skull found in Mexico nearly 80 years ago. Extensive testing has been carried out on the skull over a period of 8 years, and that testing, astoundingly perhaps, now strongly suggests that the skull shall be proven to be the first biological relic confirmed by DNA testing to be a human-alien hybrid. Lloyd Pye is an established author, researcher and lecturer in the field of alternative knowledge and intervention theory, but he is perhaps still most well known as the caretaker of the Starchild Skull. Since 1999, he has been shepherding this mysterious skull through a battery of scientific testing in an attempt to prove whether the skull is entirely human or perhaps something else. On the eve of his tour to Australia, the fabulous Lloyd Pye is my guest tonight. Welcome back to Ghost Radio, Lloyd Pye.
Well, thank you very much, Leah, and I'm very happy to not only be back on the show, but to be coming to Australia and to have some speaking engagements arranged so that people can come out and actually see the Starchild if they can get to any of the venues, and not only learn what there is to know about it, but also I'll be bringing a stereolithographic copy of it. It's as exact a copy as you can get, as science can produce, and a copy of a skull. As many people might know, you can't travel with skulls, with living relics like that, without a whole lot of problem. But also, the original Starchild skull has been cut into several times now to do the testing that we've had to do along the way. So it's no longer pristine, and it though we couldn't bring it internationally anyway. But the copy is very, very exact. It looks the same. It's painted to look the same. It's the same weight. It's the exact same size. And when you hold the two in your hand, the Starchild and a human, you see very quickly what we all saw from the very beginning, that this thing is so different, and the weight of it is so different, that it really has to be something other than human.
Is it true that when you first started travelling with the skull, you used to pass it off as a movie prop?
Yes, when I first traveled in the States with it as this was before 9/11.
Yeah.
Before 9/11. After 9/11, there was no more of that.
No.
But before then, when they were fairly lax at airports, when it would go through, I always carried it with me in my personal baggage, my carry-on baggage. When they'd run it through the X-ray machine and they would stop it or open it up and say, "What's this?" I'd say, "It's just a movie prop," and they just put it right on through. I never had a problem that way.
Wouldn't it be, when they said, "What's this?" If you must have really wanted to say, "Well, if I can get my testing, it might actually prove to be the first alien hybrid." Actually prove it.
Yeah, right. They'd have me up against the wall, hands against the wall, kind of thing. If I tried that, no, the movie prop thing worked pretty well.
Yeah, in what must be, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, a world first, at the Nexus conference, the Starchild Skull is going to be alongside, or in the same place as the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull, which is amazing.
It's an incredible confluence of coincidence that has allowed this amazing thing at the Nexus conference on the Sunshine Coast to occur. They had already long ago secured the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull. And that is, the top of the crystal skulls. That is just number one. It's totally inexplicable on a number of accounts. and that's what really makes it amazing. And so we had hoped, when I began to first get the idea of coming to Australia, to make a connection with Duncan to be at the conference, but they were booked. I mean, they booked those things out very far in advance, and I understood that. So I said, well, if they have a cancellation, let me know. And sure enough, one of the presenters, Janet Ospard, who is a crop circle specialist, has fallen ill and could not come from her home in, I think, Denmark. And so they invited me. So now, in the same venue, you're going to have the Mitchell Hedges Crystal Skull and the Starchild Bone Skull, which are, I'm certain, the two most famous skulls, and perhaps the two most famous, one relic, the Starchild is a relic, and of course the Mitchell Hedges skull is an artifact, but you have two of the most famous things in the whole field of alternative knowledge in the same place at the same time for the first time, and possibly the only time. So it's a real event. I mean, it's a real major event, and something very special for those who can get to the Sunshine Coast the weekend of the 4th, 5th, and 6th of October.
Yeah, and this seems to be a bit of a pattern for you, Lloyd. I mean, Janet Ospard is a good friend of Ghost Radio. Of course, we wish her well, and sorry she's sick, but this type of thing seems to happen with you and the Starchild Skull. I know at one stage during your journey, you gave it up. You said, I can't do it. I'm not the best person for it. I cannot do it. And then it's almost as if the Starchild Skull says, but you have to. And it arranges things so that your life, once again, becomes back on that track.
That's exactly right. I've had a number of very low moments with it where I was, facing financial ruin and ultimately did have to go bankrupt, and then was saved by a woman who said, I want this to continue, and I want you to keep doing what you're doing, and let's find out more about it. And she's the one who ultimately got the DNA testing done, and all the things that have kept it afloat have been through this one woman, Belinda McKenzie, in London, and just bless her for getting it this far.
There's a fabulous quote by you on your webpage.
I'm sorry, say again?
There's a fabulous quote by you from your webpage where you say, we can't find what we refuse to look for, which I thought was fabulous. This ride has been very crazy for you. How much harder has this journey you've been on with the Starchild been made because of that refusal by scientists to look?
Well, it's the same difficulty, I think, that anyone faces and deals with when they try to change a paradigm, because you have a very solidly entrenched power base of the status quo, and they don't want to concede any of that power, any of that influence, and most importantly, no expert in the world at anything will tolerate being forced to say, I'm wrong or I was wrong, without a knockdown, drag-out fight. And so that's what the Starchild represents, and they all know that. They they lay eyes on it and hold it, and immediately you can see. They understand what it means, and they understand that their world will change forever when this thing is acknowledged for what it is. And so most of them would try to discourage me and just say, forget about it, this is nothing, go away, forget about it. And that's because that's what they do. When they find artifacts that don't belong, it becomes what's called back pocket evidence. When a researcher's out anywhere, an anthropologist, archaeologist, and they come upon something that just absolutely doesn't fit, the vast majority of that is just put in their back pocket, and they don't tell it to anybody, and it just disappears. The tremendous number, if you know the work of Michael Cremo and others, you know how many hundreds of examples where it was found by somebody who wasn't an official scientist and didn't put it in their back pocket and put it up for examination, and then the scientists have to jump in and ridicule it and dismiss it and explain it away and make it not be looked at. The Mitchell Hedges skull being a classic example of that. So it's been an uphill swim the whole way, and I did not, frankly, when I started, understand, because I was only about a year or so into this field and into this work when I got the call to take on the Starchild, and I thought it was so obviously important and so obviously valuable that science would jump all over it, that they would be taking a number, and I would be having to interview for who would have the rights to do the studying. And I mean, it has been nothing like that. They run the other way when they see it. Now that's not to say that I haven't gotten any help, because ultimately over the years I did find a number of scientists, probably as many as 30 or 40 now, no, it's more like 60 that have actually looked at it, and probably a half dozen of those, maybe 10 of those, who've actually helped. I mean, helped. So that's not a good ratio in terms of science. Most of them, I'd say 50 of the 60, just get out of here, please. Don't associate me with this in any way. But of those 10 or so that have helped, they've really helped, and they've made all the difference, and we couldn't have done it. We couldn't be where we are now, really just one step from conclusion, without those few that have helped, and you know, bless them, they're just very courageous men and women.
I was just thinking, would it be fair perhaps to call those individuals true scientists?
Well, absolutely. The ones that are willing to risk it for truth are the true scientists, because that's what science is supposed to be about. But in fact, science is in reality, it's just a bunch of very, very fragile egos that have been put into positions of power, and so they feel an overwhelming and desperate need to cling to that power. And so anything that challenges it or threatens to upset it, they don't think about, well, how is this going to move our knowledge base forward? They think, how is this going to impact me personally and hurt me possibly if it upsets the apple cart that I'm in charge of some part of? And so, you know, it's just cowardice. When you come right down to it, it's just plain cowardice. There's no other word for it. And some few of them within their ranks have courage. It's just, that's it. And so you put them to the test and you find out who's the coward and who has the courage. And I've met a whole lot of cowards, and I've met a few really courageous people. And again, my hat's off to them, and they deserve all the praise that I can give them.
The standard answer by some of these, cowardly scientists, as we've been discussing, is cradle boarding with hydrocephaly. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. The standard reply on the Starchild, because it's the easiest and the simplest and the most obvious, and the one that they all think, that they think will make me go away. At least in the beginning they would just say, it's a cradle-boarded hydrocephalic. It's clear to anybody, and including them, that it's not either cradle-boarded or a hydrocephalic, because the human skull that was found with the Starchild is very clearly cradle-boarded, and there's a distinct difference in what that looks like in the back of the head. The real true cradle-boarding creates a very flat surface, as flat as the board that was put to the back of the baby's head. Cradle-boarding is when you strap an infant to a board so it can rest on its mother's back while she does her daily work. So it flattens the rear of the head, an area about the size of the palm of my hand. And that is all. And that knot, if you reach around to the back of your head, and everybody listening reaches around to the back of your own head and drop down to about 3/4 of the way down from the top of your head, you will feel a knot there and that's on your skull, and it's right where your neck. You feel right below that knot, you feel your neck muscles begin. Your two big major neck muscles attach around that knot, and it's there as a buttressing point. Everybody has that. They're of different sizes, but we all have it. All primates have that, and a lot of animals have that. Where your spine comes into your head, there you're going to get that, wherever that is, whatever animal it is. The Starchild doesn't have that. It doesn't have one of those. Its neck is completely different than our neck. There are many, many things that make the Starchild radically different from a normal human being. And I go over all of those in the presentation, and all of those are in the books, in the book that I've written about it. So the information is there. It's on the website, for that matter, www.starchildproject.com. So people can see what I'm saying and how true it is. So the Starchild is clearly not cradle-boarded, because the rear of its head is flat to this larger than my whole hand extended and my fingers. It's right out about that large, the flattening area, and it's more than my full hand. But also, it's not flat. It's subtly convoluted, and the convolutions are very clear, and you can see them with your eyes. So that's normal. That's how a normal head looks that hasn't been cradle boarded. So anybody can look at that and see that skull was never cradle boarded. But because it's so flat, they think that that's the only possible explanation for flatness is cradle boarding, and it's not true. The Starchild's genes told it to grow that way, and that means that its genes are not human. And as far as hydrocephaly goes, hydrocephaly is water on the brain, and when you have that, the pressure is uniform inside the brain pressing up, and if you see a hydrocephalic, their head it's very distended by the internal pressure of the water, and of course they die if they're not shunted off properly. In 900 years ago, when the Starchild died, anybody that had hydrocephaly died. Period. Boom. That's it. No going to live up to being even a child, even with teeth. So, but they do live today, of course, because the fluid is shunted off and back into the body and recycled, and their heads don't explode like a true hydrocephalic does. So it's obvious that the Starchild isn't a hydrocephalic because if you look at the rear of its head, it has in its crown, in its upper crown, in addition to being flat, just above the area of flatness in the rear, you have a dent, you have a crease, you have a dent. There's no other way to say it. It's a nice symmetrical dent, crease right down the middle of the rear of the head. And now I should point out that that's one of the things that is mentioned by people who see grays. They say, well, they had this kind of heart-shaped face, big bulgy at the top, small little narrow face at the bottom, and a dent or a crease on top. And the Starchild has all of that. So it looks very much like it could have been the skull of a gray or a gray type alien, but it's a hybrid. It's a human gray hybrid. Probably that's the most likely answer, to have its suite of differences, which are incredible and numerous, but also genetically to have its mother for sure be a human being. Its mother, in the genetic testing that we've done, we know that its mother is human and its father is not. What we have been unable to prove as yet is what the father is. It's very easy to say, well, he's not a normal human, but all that allows you to concede is that, well, he's just a very weird and a very different human. If he doesn't have human DNA, he's just some kind of very weird human. But there is a new test now that we're going to have done ultimately sometime probably started in 2009 and completed sometime probably in 2010, but that test will be able to tell us specifically and exactly to what degree the Starchild and the Starchild's father differed from human beings. And when we have that, we're going to have absolute proof that to a level that no scientist can deny, because DNA is their main tool. It's one of their absolute main tools because it's so precise and it's so repeatable. So we're very excited about the Starchild's potential to make history in the next year or two. And that's why we urge people in Australia, if they can get to either Canberra on the 26th or the 27th, or to the Nexus Conference north of Melbourne on the 4th, 5th, and 6th of October, or to you in Perth on October 11th. I'll be speaking there at the Wollaston lecture hall at the Wollaston campus. And I would invite everybody that can come to those areas, Canberra, the Sunshine Coast above Melbourne, or Perth. Do come out and do see this thing, because it's absolutely historic. And when you see me present the lecture and show the slides, and you have the ability to get a book or get videos that I've done, prior presentations, you'll have on hand all the information you need to argue with your friends about this, and you'll get to see and hold the copies, and it's just, and bring your cameras because you can take pictures as well. It's a real experience. It's not just the standard lecture. interactive experience, and it's well worth it.
It's true, and the thing I find when I read your book, which is absolutely fabulous, Lloyd's book is The Starchild Skull, Genetic Enigma or Human Alien Hybrid, and it basically outlines this journey, this amazing journey he has taken with the Starchild Skull. The other really wonderful thing about this book is Lloyd's a fabulous writer. Before he got into this strange and wonderful world, he was a screenwriter, a fictional author, so the man can really write. And I've got to say, when I read your book, I was elated, I was crying, I was upset, I was frustrated. Every single thing that you went through, I think I went through it on a much smaller scale with you, and I barely survived the book, so I don't know how you've been doing this for 8 years.
Well, I tell you, a lot of people have reacted that way to it, and I'm sorry, I've got a frog in my throat this morning. A lot of people have felt that way, like, how in the world did you hold up to this?
Yeah.
And it's the kind of treadmill that you get on, Leah, and everybody does this in life in different ways, whether it's taking a job or getting married or having a family or doing what, and you get on a path, and that becomes your path, and it's very hard to get off. And even, as you said, even when I've tried to get off, things have happened to make it so that I just can't, and I keep being pushed back on it, like as if there's some kind of purpose behind it. So I try to go with the flow of it as best I can, and tolerate the downs as well as I can, because there have been many of those. But I keep in mind, and I have for a number of years, once I really began to understand, when I first saw it, like any normal person, I thought, well, this has to be some kind of deformity, because there's no combination of events that is going to allow me, Lloyd Pye, to have in my hands here a true alien human. That just can't be possible. But as I began to research it, and as I began to look into it, and as I began to learn so much more about it, I began to understand, this probably is exactly that. And then when we finally got the DNA test result in 2004 that allowed us to really understand that this was indeed the real deal. And it was just going to be a matter of waiting until science had a technology that could prove it, that could break its DNA down base pair by base pair so that we could get the entire genome of the thing on the table to compare to human beings. Well, that capacity is available now. It became available in 2006, but we don't have the money to pay the cost of that. It's about $100,000, and we just don't have that, and there's nobody in the field with deep pockets that I know anyway that's willing to put it up. But the price keeps going down steadily, and by next year sometime it should be considerably under $100,000, and maybe I've always said that when it gets down around $50,000, I'm going to put out a plea to the community, and we'll set up a bank account, and people can just donate to it, and it'll be one of those things where you see how much is in it and how much is left to go. And when we hit the 50,000 mark in that bank account, the bank will notify us, or whatever the cost is going to be at that point, and they'll write a check to the company, and we'll get it underway. So, and then we'll have about a year to go from that point, because it's a very complicated process, which is why it's so expensive, and so few people have been able to afford it. They're doing the Neanderthal now, I should point out. They're doing the Neanderthal right now. Been working on it for coming up on 2 years. So the answer to the Neanderthal question should be coming in latter part of this year, early part of next year. And as soon as that happens, and people, there's a lot of excitement and a lot of publicity about that whole thing, that's when I think I'm going to put out the word that, hey, it's time to get to work on the Starchild. Let's get it done.
And I mean, to me, it made perfect sense why the Starchild ended up with you. I mean, a person in this month's Ufologist magazine in Australia, everybody can pick up a copy. Lloyd's got 2 fabulous articles in there to coincide with his Down Under tour. And you mentioned in this article that, you said you felt like, why would I be holding an alien hybrid skull? But then you made the point in the article, it's about probably as possible as a goat shepherd finding the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I thought, what a really good point.
I don't want to disparage goat shepherds. But yeah, that's about it. It's ridiculous. Nobody feels like they're worthy of something of that magnitude. I don't think anybody would really. You'd have to have an ego off the charts to feel like, oh yeah, I'm deserving of this. I just didn't feel that way.
But a person like that would never get, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I can understand, would never end up with the Starchild Skull. But you, a man who's written a book, basically the title was Everything You Think You Know Is Wrong. Everything you know is wrong. So to me, I'm thinking it's divine intervention. It was all perfect.
Well, it certainly has worked out on a number of levels well, and I think that when we get it all done and we bring it home and it becomes one of the big events in history, which I think is going to happen, then that whole process of what I went through is going to be probably broken down and studied in some considerable detail. And I'll just have to put up and tolerate that because obviously there are mistakes as well. I didn't do everything right. I didn't do everything in a timely fashion. I mean, I've told the owners on many occasions, get somebody else. Somebody else would be so much better than me at this, And they just adamantly say, nope, you're the one we want. Let it take as long as you need. I mean, it's been years, and they just patiently wait. They never pressure me. It's just it's been a miracle that such wonderful, wonderful people would have this fall into their hands. Ray and Melanie Young of El Paso, Texas, just wonderful human beings. And I contrast that, interestingly enough, with the man Fred Hansen, who shot the Bigfoot in Minnesota in 1967. And instead of turning it over to science, and we'd have this whole question of hominoids, Bigfoot and Yowie, and all that would be settled and solved if this man hadn't been just such a complete jerk, a little carnival hustler. And when he shot that thing, rather than turn it over to science, he put it in a freezer and filled it with water and froze it. And I assume you in Australia heard about this hoax, this Bigfoot hoax in Georgia. Last week here in the States.
Oh yes,
that was claimed that they had found the Bigfoot. Well, the guy that was behind that is named Tom Viscardi, and now this is his third or fourth major Bigfoot hoax. And you would think that a guy with that track record, as soon as the media saw that he was involved in it, they would pay no attention to it, whatever. But I think he owns radio stations or something, so he has some connections with the media. And so they all jump and dance around Tom Viscardi, oh, this is wonderful, oh, where everybody in the serious researchers in the community, of which I'm one, we all just gag that a guy like that gets such publicity for an obvious, flailingly obvious hoax. And the things out there that are, really worthwhile, like the Patterson film and like other things, are poo-pooed and dismissed because they have a good chance of being legitimate. Same thing with the Starchild. Here's something that's really legitimate, and we can't hardly buy coverage of it. And if there was somebody out there claiming some rubber mask hoax thing, it would be all over the news. It's ridiculous how the system works, but that is how it works.
I found it interesting in your book, The Starchild, you talked about the fact that, I've forgotten the gentleman's name, but you'll be able to tell me, when doing research into abductees, people who describe the classic grey were automatically put down as someone who's probably just recalling stuff they've seen or heard on movies, yet people who described something a bit more like what you have portrayed on the front cover of the Starchild Skull were automatically put into this is probably real basket.
Yes, that's Bud Hopkins, who is one of the most famous researchers into alien abductees. Excuse me. And Bud, why he revealed this, I don't know, but a couple of years ago he wrote an article saying that the classic image of a gray is the one that was on the cover of Whitley Strieber's famous book, Communion. That very doleful-looking creature with the very short top of its head and a very long lower face and a very baleful kind of threatening kind of expression. And that cover sold 1 million books. It was a very dramatic cover, but they knew going in from the beginning that isn't how the creatures that Whitley was dealing with, Whitley Strieber, who wrote it, Sorry, I'm I'm phlegmy this morning. I don't know why.
That's okay.
The storm. I'm sure people have heard about Gustav, and that went by here fairly nearby where I live on the coast of Florida. And we have had several days of just very high humidity here because of that. So I apologize for this coughing I'm doing. I'm not sick. It's just very high humidity where I am.
That's fine.
But anyway, so Whitley announced through a magazine or through an article in the UFO Journal that researchers like himself know that that image on the communion cover is not what real grays look like. They look like what the Starchild looks like. So he said that when they show that picture to someone who claims to have been abducted, and they say, well, did they look like this? And if the person says, oh, yeah, that's how they look, they know that it's just not going to be a true story. Whereas if they show that picture, that communion cover to somebody and say, did they look like this? And that person says, no, that isn't what I saw. I saw somebody fairly different from that. And they begin to describe how the Starchild looks, the Starchild Skull, the image built around that would look. Then they know they're dealing with somebody who's probably had a real experience. So yeah, it's a fascinating little anecdote.
It sure is. Now, the 454 test that you were talking about previously, which is the ones we're waiting for in 2010, they're going to tell us about a couple of anomalies of the skull. The ones I wanted to touch on were the fact that it's half as light but twice as strong as a human skull. It has durable fibres, and all of this can be seen in Lloyd's book and off his webpage now if you want to get along and have a look. And a strange red residue that has just never been seen before in anything human. Presumably, these tests might be able to explain what's going on there.
Well, exactly. It's not just those things, Leah. There are about probably 24 major physiological differences within the skull of the Starchild relative to human beings. Now, I'm talking major things that are just completely different. Like we talked about earlier, the missing knot at the back of the head, which is called the inion, that's one. The complete realignment of the neck, that's two. There are missing flanges of bone on the inside of the neck, that's three. That's the eye sockets are completely different. The brain capacity is massively different. As you said, the thickness of the bone is half what it ought to be, but its durability is 2 or 3 times what it ought to be. Incredible stuff. It's more, the bone of the Starchild is more like tooth enamel than it is like bone. And it does have woven through it these fibers, these incredible fibers that are not seen and not known to be in any other bone on Earth. Same thing with the red residue that was left in the cancellous holes. After death, you have nothing left in anything in a natural way. If you die in a natural way and let Mother Nature take care of your body, you're consumed down to nothing. So all of these things are because the Starchild's genes told it to grow that way. Because it's in perfect coordination. You have all of these things different from a normal human being, and if you think, well, you have 1 or 2 or 3, it's just deformity. But when you have a couple of dozen, and they all somehow function together such that this being lives, and it could have lived, it wasn't necessarily a child, it could have lived to 500 years old, and we don't know. So it's a remarkable feat of genetic engineering to create such a massively different thing. So if you account for just the genes in the head that created that much difference, you have to assume that the genes in the body are every bit as different as they are from humans as well. So with that bit of knowledge, which we have, which we're certain about, I mean, there's no doubt about it, we know going into this testing process, this expensive testing process that we have to afford at some point, we know going in that the result is going to show that the Starchild's genes are massively different from a human being. Now, let's look at that. What's going to happen during that testing procedure? Right now, as everybody knows, the entire human genome has been recovered. All 3 billion base pairs. That's the smallest unit, the base pair. And those 3 billion base pairs go into making up between 20 and 30,000 genes. We still don't know how many yet, but between 20 and 30,000 genes. And those 20 or 30,000 genes are combined into, for each human being, 46 chromosomes, 23 which come from our mother, 23 which come from our father. So 3 billion base pairs. Now, we've also sequenced the genome of chimps, of gorillas, I think rabbits, mice. Several creatures now have been fully sequenced so that we can compare and see how we all relate to each other genetically, because they're trying to figure out the pattern of evolution. That being the case, we know that chimps are about 97% the same as humans. There's only about 3% difference. That make, and there's a lot of difference between chimps and human beings. It's about 5% for gorillas. 5% difference for gorillas genetically in that whole 3 billion genome package. 95% is the same for gorillas, 97% is the same for chimps. I argue and I believe that the Starchild's DNA, its genome, is going to be at least as far away as 3%, possibly 5%. It could be 10% because it is so incredibly different. Now, again, chimps very different too, but it tells you, if you look at the differences in a chimp and the differences in the Starchild, it's not much. They're about the same. The Starchild is as radically different in its own ways as a chimp is. For example, a chimp has an inion. A chimp has sinuses. Starchild doesn't have sinuses. A chimp has things that humans don't have: big eyebrow, big brow ridges, no forehead. So but I think it's going to be in the range of that 3% to 5% difference for the Starchild. Now, can any scientist in the world argue that if it's that different, that it's human? No. It's clearly going to be alien at that point. Even if it was 1% difference, it's not human. Even if it was 0.5% difference, it's not human. To be human, you have to be human. You have to line up with human beings. What makes us all different, supposedly, is like 1/10% of the whole package is where the differences in us lie. See what I mean?
Yeah.
We are all different, but it's like we're clones. This is one of the mysteries of DNA. Is the evidence is that from a Watusi to a pygmy, there's only a small fraction of the DNA is different. We are almost as if we are clones. We are so alike. There is more. Listen to this little stat. There is more genetic difference within a standard troop of chimpanzees or a standard grouping of gorillas. Just find a little group of them out there. There will be more genetic difference within the members of those groups than there are within the entirety of humanity. You can't find two human beings with as much genetic difference, it's not even close, as two standard chimps that you pull out from anywhere. So it's clear that this relates to some of my other work, which I won't be talking about in Perth, but I will be talking about in Canberra, and I will be talking about at the Nexus conference. But some of my other work has to do with human origins, and it's clear that we're genetically engineered. I mean, it's just obvious on a number of fronts that we are genetically engineered, and not just us, a number of other, all domesticated plants and animals are genetically engineered. They don't belong here. They're not natural. They wouldn't be here in the form that they're in if somebody hadn't come in and intervened, and that's the basis of what's called the intervention theory, which I'm a big proponent of that as well. So I wear two very different hats in the field of alternative knowledge, and I'm probably the only person that I'm aware of who has 1 foot solidly in the human origins and hominoid, Bigfoot and all that camp, and 1 foot solidly in the UFO alien camp with the Starchild. So I bring that kind of information with me. I'll only be doing the Starchild in Perth, but I will bring access to DVDs of my other work, and for those who are interested and want to see it. So, don't let that discourage you. The Starchild is going to knock you over.
And before, as you've just said, before you got into the Starchild project work, you were on the immersed in this hominoid work. What fascinated you about hominoids? Why did you start researching them?
Because I read a book when I was a senior in college, this is now 40 years ago, called Abominable Snowmen, Legend Come to Life by Ivan Sanderson, and it just one of those life-changing things, Leah. There's no other way. It just hooked me. I was so sure the man was right, and it made such good sense, and I could just see the science behind it. I mean, the guy was a zoologist. He knew what he was talking about. He made such a compelling case. I just completely bought into it, and I said, I want to know more about this. And so I just started studying. This was before the internet, obviously, and there wasn't a lot of information. The whole field of hominoids was new. Sanderson was breaking ground with it. So I got in sort of on the ground floor and studied as best I could, and it's like an avocation or a hobby. It just never left me. I wanted to know what that was about. And when by the time I was 30, I realized and understood that the hominoids were, in fact, what we were being told was the pre-humans, the Australopithecines, Lucy, and Homo habilis and Homo erectus and all that. Those are upright walking apes, and I knew that. Those were not pre-humans. Those were just a continuation of what had come in the Miocene era. So I didn't know where we came from, and not until I found the work of Zechara Sitchin in 1990 did I have an understanding of where and how we came to be, and I understood. Oh yeah, intervention. It all makes sense. And genetics was beginning to develop then, and I just stayed with it. I'm one of those perpetual students, somebody that's just always trying to learn new things.
Yeah.
And it just all added up for me, and I realized that I could make a difference by combining what I knew about hominoids and what Sitchin knew about what he knew about, and I could make something new and different and special, and so that's what I did with Everything You Know Is Wrong. And
you do that extremely well. I mean, I've seen a video of one of your presentations, and for anybody who has immersed themselves in Sitchin's work, and I don't want to take anything away from Zechariah because it's just fabulous, but became a little overwhelmed, Lloyd presents it in a aha type of a way, and I would just urge everybody to get Lloyd's work on the intervention theory as much as what probably the Starchild Skull is. Just as important, really, isn't it?
I think both of them are equally important, and both of them are going to be equally historic in their own time when they come to be acknowledged. I think the Starchild will ultimately, and probably within the next year or two, and I believe just equally strongly that hominoids are going to be ultimately acknowledged for what they are. It's inevitable. I mean, it's the truth is obvious, the truth is out there, and the truth prevails in the end. So I just want to, stay alive and keep doing my part of it, and I'll be on the team. That's good enough for me. I'm going to be on the team that levers both of those into public awareness and public acceptance, both the alien reality with the Starchild and hominoid reality with the work that I do there. Somebody's going to do it, and I'll be on the team, and that's exciting for me.
So the Georgia hoax, as a researcher, that must have just frustrated the hell out of you.
Oh, it did. It kills us all. It's not just this once, though. Periodically, there's another Bigfoot hoax or another UFO alien hoax, and it just smears all of us, and it makes us feel bad. But I have to tell you, there was one really hilarious thing that happened here in the States relative to that hoax, and I think you folks in Australia will get a kick out of it. Here in the States, the hoax occurred in a state called Georgia, North Georgia. And it's a very much a redneck, backwoodsy kind of area, north of Atlanta. It's up in the mountains, kind of. And the state next to Georgia is called Alabama. Now, Alabama is really the home of the rednecks, okay? And in fact, there's a second anecdote. I'll just mention this one briefly. When the rednecks in Alabama heard that Russia had invaded Georgia, they all went out and bought guns and ammo because they weren't going to let it happen to Alabama. Okay. That's number one. But anyway, so Alabama and Georgia have this kind of rivalry. Their football teams go against each other. I mean,
Yeah.
So they were announcing it. They were announcing it all over the country. But at one point, there was a stage where they submitted a sample for DNA testing. You may have heard this, and the DNA sample came back as a mixture of human and opossum.
Yeah.
Opossum,
Yeah.
little animal. So it came back as human and possum. And so as it was being announced by a news crew here, and it was a man and a woman, and the woman was doing the announcing, she said, and the result came back that it was a mixture of human and opossum. And the man just deadpanned beside her and said, "That's still legal in North Georgia, isn't it?"
Oh,
I
dear.
thought that was hilarious. That went all over the internet. So, yeah, that was a great line.
That is a fabulous line. Oh, gee, you've got to laugh, really, isn't it? That's what it comes down to. You've just got to laugh.
Gotta laugh. Look, that's a good one to quit on. I think we're about out of time, aren't we?
We are, yes. I just want to mention that Lloyd is coming to Australia, and he does have a wonderful Australian connection. The fact that his wonderful wife.
Let me give people how to get the information that they might need. If you go to my website, www.lloydpye.com, LLOYDPYE.com, LLOYDPYE.com, lloydpye.com. The first page you pull up right there to the left, it will be the Australian tour. You can click on that, and you can find the places, the times, the dates of the Canberra events, the two events on the 26th and the 27th, the Nexus Conference events on the 4th, 5th, and 6th. I speak on the 5th, Sunday at 11:30 in the morning, and then at Perth, of course, Saturday, October 11th. Is it Saturday or Sunday? Saturday, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Saturday, October 11th at the Williston Conference Center at Williston College, and by all means, it's who to contact to get tickets, and all of the information that you need will be there, lloydpye.com. So I hope to see those of you that hear this who can make it to one of those three, because I believe you'll find it, I think, one of the more rewarding experiences that you've had in terms of increasing your own personal body of very interesting alternative knowledge.
Yes, and as you can hear, Lloyd is a fabulous presenter. All of that information is available on Ghost Radio right now. You can connect on through to the various people who are hosting Lloyd's events, and you can get tickets through there. You can go to Lloyd's webpage. You can get his book his books from Lloyd's webpage, or again from Ghost Radio. So there's many ways to find out what's happening, and do come along, do hear this very important information. It's important that we keep the Starchild Skull out and the campaign active until 2009, 2010, if it takes that long, because the more emphasis that's placed on the Starchild Skull, it's going to make the people who are doing the test want to basically get the Starchild Skull in the lineup. Is that right, Lloyd? Have I explained that properly?
Yeah, well, listen, we could start tomorrow. If somebody, if we had that deep pockets person step forward and contact me and say, hey, look, I want to get this started now, we can start tomorrow. I can call 454 Life Sciences and say, what's the bill right now? And they write them a check, and we're underway. We'll send them a sample of the bone, and we're off to the races. But I've been trying for years since 2004 to get somebody to do that, and nobody has yet. So it isn't likely, and I don't look for it. I think this is one of those where we're just going to have to do it ourselves. And so when the price drops within range, and I think that after the announcement of the finish of the Neanderthal will be a good time to do it.
Yes, no, I agree.
Campaign to try to get the money, and we'll just gather it, nickel and dime it if we have to, but we'll eventually get it, and we'll eventually get it started, and we will get our answer, and we'll be able to cram it down the throats of all those who say it's impossible, can't be true, da-da-da-da.
Yeah, well, I think they're in for a really big surprise.
They are.
Thanks, Lloyd, for being such a fabulous guest, and we're looking forward to meeting you and can't wait to see you in Australia. Lloyd's wife, by the way, is Australian, so this is kind of like coming home for him in a way, isn't it?
That's right. We're going to be in Adelaide. Amy's from Adelaide, and we'll be there. That's the main reason that we're coming, is so she can have some time with her family, and really she'll be with me at Canberra and at the Nexus Conference. She will not be with me at Perth, though, unfortunately. And we'll just have to make do with that. But the whole purpose really is for her to spend as much time with her family as she can, and so we're going to honor that.
Okay. Make sure, everybody, that you get Lloyd's book, The Starchild Skull, Genetic Enigma or Human-Alien Hybrid. You can get it through Ghost Radio, or you can go to Lloyd's webpage or belllockbooks.com, so you can get it through various places. Thanks, Lloyd, so much.
Thank you, Leah, and John as well. You guys have a good one.
Okay, that's Underworld for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe, and blessings to you all.
You've been listening to Australia's own Underworld Show with host Lia Ramses. The Underworld Show is produced in Perth, Western Australia by iProdigy Communications exclusively for Ghost Radio Australia and the Ghost Radio Network. Tune in every Sunday at 8 p.m. Perth time to hear fascinating guests and topics such as the one you just listened to. For more information on upcoming guests, events, and breaking news, visit www.underworldshow.com or www.ghostradio.com.au.